Hello everybody. A warm welcome to our discussion about careers. This should be a subject that most everyone is interested in, unless you're retired. But even if you're retired, you're probably concerned about your children and grandchildren. What kind of career are they going to embark upon that's going to provide them with the standard of living that they seek? Standard of living in which they seek. Kind of an interesting term, right? That is because the standard of living of one person is different than the standard of living of another. Some people may want more out of life, some less. Some want more generous material possessions, others less. Some just want to have fun, some just want to do some interesting, meaningful work. We all have ambitions. All those ambitions determine the type of career we embark upon, and also what we want out of our career. My grandma used to say, you've got to have a reason to get up in the morning. Kind of an interesting aspect. Profound, yes, especially from a person who spent most of their life on welfare. Obviously, so did my mom and her sister. It's a terrible life in a way, but this was many years ago, before there really was a place and a time where women could have an active type of career. So many careers weren't open to women back in my grandmother's days. We're talking in the 1940s. And so it was a difficult time to raise children. My mom as well didn't really have the opportunities for careers that women later had. Very unfortunate. Almost a time many of us can't comprehend, but it existed. My mom always wanted to be a nurse, couldn't though during that time. Today, though, the careers are open for just about anyone, any place, any time. It's a great place, a great time to really choose what you want to do in life. That's really what career development is. That's what careers are. It's what you want to do in life. Have something important to do. Have a reason to get up in the morning. I followed that dictum by my grandmother to this day. I've always wanted to do a couple things in my life. I wanted to teach. I wanted to write books. Thankfully, I was able to do both, and still able to do both. Very lucky. And luck has something to do with it, but certainly not everything to do with it. There are certain aspects that determine the type of career that you're going to have. Certainly your passion, for one. You've got to have a passion for what you do. Passion is what you enjoy, what you seek to do, what you get up in the morning to do. It's quite early in California as I do this presentation. There's other things that you can do, of course, but I choose to do this because it's something I'm passionate about. Find something that you're passionate about, so the saying goes, and you'll never work a day in your life. But career is really about work. When we define career, we look at a distinct path or course that someone takes in their life. It's becoming more complicated today. Back in my dad's day, he would work one job for 30 or 40 years. I think 32 years he worked in the same company. He ended up owning part of the company. He bought into the company and became a shareholder, quite a sizable shareholder, when the company was sold. He did well. But at the time, he was a worker. He started in this career. Why did he choose that career? He chose that career because he didn't graduate high school. Again, different times. It wasn't as necessary to graduate high school or even attend college back in the day because there was many more manufacturing, physical type jobs. Those jobs don't exist to the same level. Percentages tell the whole story. When you're looking at 20 and 30% or more 50, 60 years ago working in manufacturing, which provided a very stable life for you and your family, today those figures are below 10. The average person has 4 to 6 different careers in their life. The average person as well has 12 to 15 different jobs just by the time they're 50. Think of that. So when we think of a career, it's much different today than it was some time ago. There's people who started and ended, like my dad, in the same job. Actually, the same company. Rarely does that exist today. It's a rarity to find somebody who is the age of 40 or 45 who spent the last 20 or 25 years in the exact same company. Maybe not the same typical job in that company, but certainly within the same company. It's a rarity. If they do, they often work for the government. The government offers a stable type of job. However, one of the reasons why the average person doesn't stay in a job very long is because the average business doesn't stay in existence for a period of time. The average business, in fact, stays in play in business for about 10 years. When you start a small business, 50% are gone within the first 5 years. Therefore, your odds, the luck of working in a company for the same period of time of 40, 50 years that your parents or grandparents worked is almost an impossibility. Certainly, it's rare. Current and more recent generations have more careers than historical generations because of technology, because of transportation, because of telecommunications. Certainly because of the options. Globalization has upended the very foundations and fabrics in which we work, whereas a product or service needed to be created, produced, manufactured, sold within the same locality as a person lived. Today that doesn't happen. We can buy a product from Africa, Asia, just about any continent in the world, and often get it the next day. As a result, jobs are more fluid. Jobs are more fluid, then careers are more fluid. So we see that we're going to have many, many more jobs on average than previous generations. We're also going to have many more distinct careers. When I left college, I started in the banking industry. Banking. Then I went into telecommunications. Certainly didn't go to school for either of those careers. I ended up in the public sector. Through that, I started writing my books and teaching my classes. Didn't go to school to do either of those as well. But yet that's the generation that we're in, is that there's so many more opportunities and possibilities today than ever before. However, it can be quite a trial, quite a tribulation to go through this world without having a keen understanding of what you want to do with your life, or if you do, one that doesn't last. We've learned that the mark of a person isn't what brought them down, but what has brought them back up. For those who lose their career, lose a specific job, the next one's the most important. What we did last year isn't as important as what we do next year. And one key aspect that I relate to almost everyone that I converse with in relation to a career, the promise of the future, is that nothing lasts. We'll visit that in the last slides, but nothing lasts. The great job you have today may be the lost job you have tomorrow. If you aren't working and seeking and looking for the next job, then you're going to find yourself quite destabilized once you realize that the job you have doesn't exist anymore. There's no excuse not to be continually to look for that next job. Because there's many more factors today that affect a job than ever before. From globalization, as we talked about, and I have talked about globalization and technology are the twin factors of our world today. They have upended nearly every aspect of our life. Most importantly, though, they've offered us many more possibilities. It's daunting to have to take those possibilities. We'll talk a bit more about that. The inability of firms to control competition. The declining time frame to exploit your competitive advantage. Another factor is the relentless pursuit of quality and how easily quality can be obtained. Another is that the customer is the focus of everything that we do, and last is what we call knowledgeable workers. These are the factors that affect the career and the jobs that we take. The first, of course, is globalization. 30% of the world's GNP is based on an import and export. Back in the 1800s, only 2% of our world's GNP was either an import or an export. Obviously, those products were sent by ship, the only really mode of transportation between countries. Certainly countries that weren't contiguous. You may have had railroads during some periods of those times. But from one continent to another, it's often sent by ship. That could take weeks. As a result, there was very little trade between countries. Usually it was trades of raw materials. Japan's a great example. Japan doesn't have many raw materials. They had to import much of their raw materials. Then, of course, they use those raw materials to create finished goods. If we talk about the increase in globalization, what's most interesting, not just it was 2% versus 30% today, but it's tripled in just the last 25 to 30 years. A full 70% of anything that is made or sold in the world today can be imported or exported. If we create a product and we want to sell it to our neighbor, if we want to lock in our market, interesting concept. However, 70% of what we made, somebody else can make in some other part of the world and import into your country. And if you can't make it cheaper, better, faster, of a higher quality, you're going to lose business. The loyalty that a customer has to buy a product doesn't exist to this level that it did even 30 years ago. People will buy from any place, anywhere, as long as the price is right and the quality is right. Labor costs in some countries is about 90% less than in the U.S. So if we're going to make something in the United States and try to sell it, and our labor costs are upwards of 90% higher than other countries, we're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. We're not going to be able to make the sale. That's why we see some companies moving overseas. They move overseas because if they don't, then some other country that houses a specific business within that country will produce a product or service and then ship it into the United States. Given that their labor costs are 90% less, then they most likely are going to sell that product much less in the United States than the United States could produce and sell it themselves. By the way, it's not just labor costs. We get stuck on labor costs a lot, as saying that that's the root cause that so many businesses move overseas. That's not the sole reason. It is a reason, but not the sole reason. Is it the principal reason? Possibly, but it's not the sole reason. Land costs are much higher in the United States. We understand in California to create or to build some kind of building to produce a product could take years. The environmental regulations, justified they may be, are so onerous to a business, so expensive, that they say it's not worth it. We'll build it either in some other state or some other country. And taxes. Taxes are much higher in the United States, especially in relation to commercial organizations, than it is in other countries. Other countries want businesses. They want businesses because businesses create jobs. Jobs create taxes. Taxes fund the government. The more jobs and the more better jobs certainly raises the standard of living of a country. As a result of raising the standard of living, then there's more monies to share to those who can't at least participate in one way or another in the growth of an economy of a country. Maybe the young, maybe the old, maybe those who have some sort of disability. Those all benefit when a country attracts a company to build a business, to hire employees, of which those employees can then sustain themselves, and to give a portion of their incomes to others, maybe those who are not as fortunate. Competition. Our jobs, our careers are dependent on competition. What's interesting is the United States made about 75% of the world's vehicles back in 1950. We certainly have nowhere near. We're less than a third. They controlled industries, and as a result of controlling industries, they dictated the factors of production. Remember when I talked about my dad working at the same company for 30 years? It's because there wasn't much competition in the company that he worked in. That company didn't have to worry about foreign sales or imports. As I mentioned, just in the last 25 to 30 years, the rate of imports and exports has tripled. Amazing. In the 1950s, the GMs could build just about any car at any price and any quality and expect to sell it. I'm old enough to remember that if you had a car that went 60 or 70,000 miles, you got great use out of that car. No such car would last today. We certainly expect cars to at least hit 100,000 miles, certainly more. And as a result of the lack of competition after World War II, companies got what we would say lazy. They didn't reinvest in their businesses. They paid too much to produce their products. Their products weren't competitive, and yes, they became a competitive advantage. A competitive advantage in the 1950s became a competitive disadvantage after that. An advantage is something you're good at. Back in the 1950s, specific to the car market, the U.S. was the only game in town. In fact, after World War II, the U.S. had about 6% of the world's population, and they produced about 40% of the goods and services, not just cars. They could produce anything they wanted, and it would sell. But other companies started to reinvest after the war. They started to rebuild their economy, and certainly their industrial bases. As a result, they were building products that were newer, better, faster, and cheaper. They competed well against the U.S. The U.S. lost their competitive advantage that they had in 1950, which means you have to now create a new competitive advantage. If your prices are high, you have to compete on something else. Maybe you have the latest and greatest technology. Maybe it's the ability to deliver that product in an expedited period of time. Maybe the quality is much, much better. Reputation's better. Resale's better. You've got to have something that's better in order to sell your product, in order for people to choose to buy your product. Boeing is one of those companies that has a competitive advantage against nearly any aircraft manufacturer. Why? Their products are seen as light years ahead of others. They have a sense of quality and stability, and there's trust in the word Boeing. Will that last? We hope so. It's lasted for quite some time. It requires Boeing to continue to invest in what we call research and development, to research the next product and develop it. We understand many of those products are going to be related to something about the green technology. Lessen the carbon footprint of airplanes. Boeing's working considerably on that aspect, as are the ability to maybe have a battery-operated plane. Sounds like something that can't happen. But the first that does, it's going to allow them and provide them with a competitive advantage that they're going to be able to sell in the workplace. Sell. Competitive advantages have to be compensable, which means people have to pay for it. So if you're building a car that has innovative colors that no one else has, that may be interesting to a buyer, but are they going to buy it? Are they going to pay extra, a premium, for that? Depends. But it has to be compensable. What you sell, what's your competitive advantage, somebody else must buy. So we have to know that the innovation of tomorrow is often matched or exceeded within a brief time frame, which means that our competitive advantage often doesn't last. Just like I mentioned some moments ago that nothing lasts in terms of a career or a job, nothing lasts in terms of a competitive advantage. As soon as a business identifies a competitive advantage and markets that competitive advantage to success within their industry, their competitors will do the same thing. They'll catch up. They'll realize that they're losing market share, customers, because the competitive advantage of their competitor. If that continues, they'd be out of business. So they need to determine their own competitive advantage, or at least match the competitive advantage of others in the firm. One of the most important aspects that we look for in a career is working for a company that has a high degree of quality. When we look at careers, when we look at those careers that we want to interact with, that we want to spend our life with, we want to make sure that not just the career, but the organization has a high degree of quality. Quality is that one aspect that can almost never be replaced. It is at the forefront of almost every product or service that is sold. If you think of accountants, you typically don't go to a cheap accountant. You go to a good accountant. It may cost you more money, but the better accountants often charge more money. They have quality. We certainly don't want to have a tax return that the IRS says that doesn't meet the quality standards. We're going to fine you. Consumers usually pay more for quality. And if they don't pay for more for quality, then usually you're going to have to charge less for the product or service that you sell. It may be, the single most important reason that companies are required to change products or services so often. What they sell doesn't meet the quality standards. We, as an employee, have to provide quality in what we do. So much of what we're talking about, from globalization to quality and now to customers, talk about what we as an employee need to have in order to have a career. We have to work for a customer. There's very few people that you meet don't have a customer, don't care about a customer. Produce a product or service that is going to be sold regardless of who the customer is. But if we want a job, if we want a career, we have to realize that if we don't have somebody to buy what we're selling, we don't have a job. Whatever decision or action in an organization always has to be related to finding and maintaining a customer. It is the focus of everything that we do. I once heard, the customer may not be right, but the customer is the customer. That doesn't mean that we need to sell our soul for a customer. It does mean that we have to realize that if we want to stay in business, if we want to have a career, we have to be perfectly attuned to the customer. And last but certainly not least, we have to have knowledge. Those that have the best careers have the greatest knowledge. Organizations, you see, have the same access to technology and financial resources that everybody else has. The one thing that they don't have is the access to the mind. That one variable, as I talk to so many individuals, and those individuals who are seeking careers, seeking something better, not just for themselves, but for their families and friends, who are looking for a higher standard of living. That one trait that can never be replicated is the mind. We can encourage and motivate and teach people to work harder, but we really can't teach them to think differently. So much of college is about that, right? To provide somebody with the knowledge and then to use that knowledge to make better decisions. It's really what knowledge is for, right? To make better decisions. Organizations that are the most innovative and at the forefront of their industry have employees with the greatest knowledges that exist. It is the key differentiation in an organization, and it is the key differentiation of an employee. It is that one aspect that a robot or artificial intelligence just can't master. The ability to think differently, to think consequentially, remains, again, that singular trait that differentiates the superstar from the star from just the regular person. If you can think in a different, innovative, unique manner, one that others can't, in my opinion, you will always have a job. Not just a job, you'll always have the job. Are there exceptions? Of course. Should we use the word always? Probably not. But for emphasis, it is that trait. That trait comes from knowledge. Without knowledge, we can't train our mind to think differently. The more we read, the more we interact with other people, the more we watch, the more we listen, the more we hear, that information, which is what it is taken into ourselves. And from that information, we synthesize and analyze that information and create knowledge. I'm writing a new book. The new book is going to be about our cultures and histories and how to create a world of generosity and graciousness and gratitude. The hope is that information, that knowledge resonates with people. What's most interesting about it, as I embark on the 11th book, is that no one else can write that book. Now, the topic is not new. Others have written about the subject, but as far as the book I'm writing, no one else can write it. Just like I can't write what you write. That is what distinguishes me from anyone else. Hopefully it's compensable, as we mentioned. Hopefully people buy it. But if not, it is that singular characteristic of being different and distinct that separates one person from another. That hopefully, over time, makes that one person the superstar and the other just the star. And in our world, those who are superstars are the ones that are ruling the future. What do we need to know? We need to know that nothing lasts. We need to constantly re-educate, retool, and reskill. We know we have to constantly look for a new job, but if we understand and are confident that nothing lasts, then we'll always be looking forward. What has passed will never occur again. It may occur in a different variation or form, but it'll never occur again. But we have the opportunity today to create something different for the future. Those that are doing that have the greatest promise of a standard of living that in some cases can't be equaled. Second, we have to have a knowledge or skill that no one else has. So while nothing lasts, if we have that skill or knowledge that no one else has, we have the ability to be unique and distinct in our world. People pay for something that's different. I often say that just about so many people that we meet, it's hard to find somebody who has the exact same name as you. And if they do, it's not spelled the same. We all want something unique in this world, different, that differentiates ourselves from somebody else. If we have a knowledge or skill that's like that, can you imagine how powerful, how compensable that is? That knowledge or skills allows us to think differently. From clothes to cars to furniture, we want something different in our lives. This is a world where we often emphasize what makes us different than what makes us common. We don't assimilate as much as we did 50 or 100 years ago, good or bad. We don't. We want to be different. We want to stand out. As a career, if you can have that mindset, which comes from the knowledge or skill that we have, that allows us to think differently, that is a powerful trait that companies scammer for in their workplace. And lastly, work hard, be kind, and never give up. I talked about this so much in so many of my presentations. It is somewhat the mantra. The mantra is also to do something good, or be someone good and do something great. It's what I tell my children all the time. Be someone good, do something great. To do that, you have to work hard, be kind, and never give up. So what do we need to do to obtain the career that we want in our future? We've got to realize and have a keen understanding that nothing lasts. The good that's happening today is not going to happen tomorrow. Doesn't mean we have a negative or pessimistic type of viewpoint. It means that we realize that nothing lasts, that we've got to look for what's next. We have to have a skill or knowledge that no one else has, and that allows us to think differently. And if we can think differently and also work hard, be kind, and never give up, we have a chance, just a chance, to make it. A better than equal chance to make it. Because it is a challenging world. We can't choose the cards we're dealt, but we sure can choose how to play them. I hope you play your cards right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the day.